How's everybody today?
Terrible.
Tell us about it.
Oh, yeah. Go home and tell your shrink or something. So, how many people here aspire to be film composers? Well, not full-time, but at all. I mean, you know, that's not an unusual aspiration for anyone. How many people aspire to be film composers?
Yeah, here you go.
Okay. Well, most people who do film composing don't, you know, just one day they perspire to be, yeah. They don't walk right into it. Most people go to work with a film composer. It's an open secret in Hollywood that a film composer doesn't do all the composition himself. It's almost like they have an apprenticeship sort of situation where, you know, they bring somebody in, he works with them a while, they work their way up in the business. We have here two people who are apparently working their way up in the business. They worked with Hans Zimmer on Dune. And who's seen Dune? Dune 2, I mean. Yeah? Most everybody. Well, one of the most outstanding things about it, obviously, is the soundtrack, which is, if you haven't heard it, is absolutely amazing. And these guys have worked with Hans Zimmer, and we're going to find out a little bit about what that process was like. How did he make contact with you? You made contact with him? How did this get started?
It's a complex story, but basically on my side, on Easter Sunday last year, when I woke up, I had a message saying, "Hello, I'm a musician. I'm making moving music. My name is Hans Zimmer, and I would like you to work with me on Dune 2. And say, what the hell? Yeah. So I showed it to my wife. I called my best friend François and said, "Hey, you're making me a joke," but that was not a joke. And on the same evening, I had a video call with him, and we discussed, and that was it. He said, "Okay."
Did you sleep that night?
In fact, when I say that same day, it was literally in the middle of the night. I guess the first meeting I had with him was 2 or 2:30 in the morning for me.
And you knew the call was coming?
Yeah.
So you did not go to bed?
No, exactly. I was waiting for the call.
Okay.
You know.
Right.
Yeah. Basically, if you rewind a little bit, in January, he required to have some osmosis. And Guillaume from Expressive met him, but at that time Hans only wanted to use Osmos to control the UE synthesizers, the VST. He has no intention to use the sound engine. So, and then there was no other contact between him and Expressive. And also I discovered later that he have a great Kevin Greenaway, who is a great conductor, who is Hans' personal conductor. He owns a Continuum for quite a while, and he told me that he always start, when he wants to work on the music, he very often starts with a Continuum. So there were some Continuum users around him, but I didn't knew it. Same thing, you know Game of Thrones, and there are continuums in it, and the composer was recording inside Hans Zimmer's studio. So it looks like there was a history behind. I was not aware of it. On my side, that was just a first direct call on an early morning Sunday, Easter Sunday.
Well, what was your experience like, Ed? Did you receive a call in the middle of the night?
Well, no, I got information from Christophe, and so we had decided that the team would be Christophe and Guillaume and myself. So
Guillaume was the first that he contacted. He recommended you?
No. I asked Guillaume. He said, "No, I didn't mention your name at all." And say internet. And that's the way he's often doing. You know, you may know Tina Guo, the famous cellist, and he identified her through video she's doing on internet. Same thing if you see Steve Mazzaro, who is one of the great composers working for him. Exactly the same thing. Nobody knew him. He spotted it on the internet, gave a call, and offered him to work with him on some movie, and they're still working together. So it looks like Hans is looking over internet and try to discover new people he would like to work with. And yeah.
So if anybody
he one thing, when I had that first call with him, he knew everything about me.
Wow.
He knew about Spring Sound, so he knew about the fact that Ed's first synthesizer was a VCS3 at the university. So
he knew my shoe size.
I know, that's kind of creepy.
He knew everything about the resonator. So it was, he did prepare the call. It was not just an impulse. It was something prepared, but yeah, I didn't know it at that time.
So his aspiration at the time was to work with you and to continue working with you.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. Yeah.
You realize after meeting him quickly that he's an absolute workaholic in the most positive aspect of that word. He's absolutely in love what he's doing. You can imagine he could retire now. He wouldn't really have to do these things. He wouldn't have to have people around him, but he's built up this empire and he just loves it. And he loves what he does, and I can imagine he's just constantly perusing new things. Like I think a lot of us do. We're looking at our news feeds, and he does that. And as a very famous, easily recognizable person, he just can't go to clubs and do things. He has to do things vicariously through the web.
Well, what was the process of working with him? Was it done remotely? Were you on site?
Well, originally I was going to be remotely, and Christophe and Guillaume were there, and we started working that way. And I realized this wasn't going to. It just wasn't going to be practical. So even though I was only 3 hours time difference away, it would be much better for me to be there because just of the schedule, the way things happen. And everybody who's working in that project, and it's a big team, and we can get in and talk about that size of the team and the way the structure is. Well-oiled machine that he has running around him. But things happen, and there's schedules, and because of the way with the sound being one of the last aspects of the movie going in, and there was also a lot of pressure at the time because there was the strike going on. Mm-hmm. And so the very big thing that was happening there was and what eventually delayed the movie being released from being in the summer to the spring was that they promote these films. So with a budget of $250 million, the promotion is absolutely huge. There's a lot at stake there financially. So I've done things in the past, and there's always, when you're the audio production, it's the very last aspect of this thing, and you're anything that's been mortgaged at the front end. Well, yeah, we expected to have the final cut ready here or whatever. That's all been pushed back, and now you have to deliver. When we were there was still, of course, editing going on. So I decided to go down and also, man, I'm just curious. Like, geez, go down to Santa Monica and go to his complex, and because you can only, if you're from the outside, you can only use. You can use things, but it's mainly your imagination, what really goes on. But when you start to interact with people right in the present scene and see the dynamics of the way that it's going on, it's much better to be there. Yeah.
Were you there a long time? Was it a long process?
I was there 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Both of you?
Yeah, and you were there an extra week and a half.
Five weeks. I did 5 weeks.
And it was intense. Like, it was working all the time. Yeah, all the time.
Well, when you're working with a workaholic, that's going to happen.
It's going to happen, yeah.
They kind of had to kick me out of the studio. It was 12 hours a day, every single day. But whenever I was out of the studio, my only will was to be back in the studio.
Speak up just a bit, Christophe.
It's so extraordinary. You're there, you're working with Hans Zimmer on the movie which is Dune, which is a book I was reading when I was a teenager, and I loved, for Denis Villeneuve, who is a huge director. So, I mean, that's a one in a life experience, and I never wanted to be out of the studio. Each time I was out, I just wanted to be back in.
So you were very excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And very tired at the end, but very excited.
So it sounds like he was appealing to your workaholic side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it really, I think Guillaume and Ed really helped me to get out of the studio, because I would have spent my whole nights there without them.
Were the two of you doing things separately, or did you work as a two-man team?
No, we were. I will show you some pictures. We were in a single control room, so the three of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was a way to always work together. Of course, you can't play all the time together. So we had headphones from time to time.
We basically,
sharing.
yeah, we were in the control room for what he called Studio B in the complex, and in a space that there's maybe 14 different studios and 4 different buildings. And
This is Hans' personal studio?
well, no, Hans has his own personal room, but he also has a proper control room studios with live rooms, and he has a number of those. And so the three of us were, you know, if you can imagine a big console in a classic control room, the three of us had our stations, and we were all set up individually to work on headphones, and we would get cues to work on, and then we'd just talk, and we'd work on headphones and run things through. What was interesting for our setup is that once we finally got it established, we had a really lovely situation where everything was matrixed out. We could take all our, we had the multi-tracks of we had what the composers had done, and then we could process everything through an array of Le Voix de Luthier processors. So we had a mic'd up pyramid, we had mic'd up owned, we had the metallic resonators, one from the Christophe had done, and then we had also the EO-Wave metallic resonator. So had a lot of nice tools in front of us.
Now, did Hans already have that, or did he expect you to bring that to the...
I brought everything except one metallic one that Hans already had. So there was one resonator from Hans, and the 3 others were from myself.
So were you pinching yourself at any point that you were there in Santa Monica, working with one of the biggest film composers in the world? Like you finally arrived?
I still don't.
Still
you
don't.
really don't realize, you know.
Well, you know what's interesting is it's like good people attract good people, and bad people attract bad people. And Hans is fundamentally a very generous, good person. And what was really amazing when we did the spotting sessions, so then you get introduced to Denis Villeneuve, and he's even nicer. And all the people around him, like there is just this general aspect. It's not that negative aspect of Hollywood that you hear about, like just some BS that would happen. Although some of his assistants and people would have backstories about people they used to work with. So the bad deviates to the bad, and the good goes to the good. And it was really refreshing. That was trepidations about that first, because as you're getting older, you don't put up, I don't need this crap, I'm just leaving type of attitude. And I didn't have to, there wasn't that thing. Everyone was like, it was really, now, whether they've gotten very good at expressing that facade, who knows, but they're really good at it. So it was.
What's that?
Oh yeah, that's sincerity. Yeah, once you learn to fake that,
Well, you already had a lot of experience in music for picture.
yes, but nothing at that
Okay,
level.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, was he aware of that when you came into the project?
I'm not actually sure. It never came up.
Okay.
And, when you're in that position, you don't really want to, you're there for hire. So, you're being asked things. So everything is relevant to the project. And what I had done before, if I wanted to express it, I would just do it through the performance.
Yes.
And bring that sort of thing. And questions would go up. But.
So did your actual performances end up on the soundtrack?
Well, as you know, that's a big movie with a big image and big sound effects and a big score. And we were, I don't know, Christophe, if you want to talk about, but that echelon of working in there did you want to? I don't know where your slides will fit in, but you know, I could explain the sort of the process.
I can show some examples which are in the movie. There are some wild ones, but.
Go ahead and show the studio since we're just.
Now would be a good time to do that.
Okay, so I can. So this is Studio B. So that's the room where we were. So that's the control room. This is Ed setup. And on the right, that's Guillaume setup. And that's the console, the huge Neve just for the mics. We can be back on it.
Huge Pro Tools system with I think it was 64 I/O.
Yeah.
So it was easy to have enough things to.
So the Neve was used just for the resonators. So it was just mixing the resonators directly to Pro Tools. On the right, that's my place. So you see here that at beginning with the resonators inside the studio. So that's the three of us. Some crazy preamp. So that's my place. And just one.
Hold on, go back.
Yeah.
That's the artwork. Here's a nice story. Pascal.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's in love with his wife so much, and vice versa. Oh, I'm not in love with the wife. No. But she made a booklet, and she's a fantastic artist and a sculptor, and she made a booklet for Christophe so that every day he could flip it, and there was new artwork of hers, and that was so every day we would go up and we would see some.
Yeah, she was always on the front of me. And
the composition at all?
Yes, surely. Yeah.
She was your inspiration?
Yeah. I'm deeply inspired. It's very different from Dune. Also, this kind of it's kind of warm here, but.
So Hans, he played the Continuum already. You said. Did he learn anything from you? About the Eagan matrix? From either of you?
Well, Hans, yeah. So he has tools. He's a really big fan of Zebra, and he's worked a lot with Howard. So I learned stories about Howard Scarr. I don't know if you know Howard Scarr from UE, but and Howard has done a lot of. He worked with on, I think since Dark Knight.
Yeah. I remember his work in the Blade Runner sequence.
Yeah, and actually Howard. Hans had reached out to Howard, but Howard, for whatever reason, didn't want to go this time around and work with Hans. Maybe because the things that he had done were already pretty well established. And also, I do know, because I'm friends with Howard, I know him through, professionally. I'm not like friends. I'm like friends, like we're friends in that level. I know him very well. But he had lost his wife. And so I think he had, a few months earlier, and he was going through, so who knows, but for whatever, he wasn't around. So Hans's tools were very specific, and he's built up his tools. He has learned to understand Zebra very well, and it serves him quite well for generating those big CS80 type of textures that he does. And that's all done through Zebra. And when he approached the Eagan matrix, he approached it very much as someone who's a competent player, but someone who doesn't read music. He is got an amazing ear. As Lippold once said, because earlier on we had set up A.R. Rahman in years earlier in the Santa Monica complex, and briefly met Hans at that particular point. And we can talk about the way the composition goes through, but Hans is one of those guys. He's like, I've equated to a master architect. And so essentially when you see a building that's designed by somebody, well, when they're later and they're very famous, they're basically, when they design something, here's that paper napkin with my sketch, and now the juniors would do it. So it's very much that structure with Hans, but he still is very much a hands-on guy, and he must have said to me 3 different times, you know, that Eagan makes, it's just so hard to program. You've got to make something easier. So
Nobody ever tells you that.
no one ever tells me that. And I'm not going to say to Hans, well, why don't you just fucking play the, you know, it's like we'd always done that. But I could understand that because they're sculptors. You know, you listen to this, you know, Dune would be just an extremely good example of the modern orchestral score, so acoustic in its feeling, but overtly electronic. But it completely sits in there. In fact, that sort of fits into the continuum paradigm quite a bit. You know. But so, you know, what did he learn from me? Who knows?
Okay. Well, for those who don't know, what is Zebra?
Zebra is a UE product. UE's they make soft synths, really, really finely. You can tell there's musicians in the company. You can tell how musical a company is by how, you know, their product just sounds so great. And Howard is a master synth programmer, and Zebra is a relatively straightforward subtractive synthesizer with a lot of interesting tools, but it's something that because Hans, I'm sure that Howard and Hans also got along because of German. So because Hans is German, and but it serves his purpose. It works really well. It sounds beautiful. It has a rich timbre of things, and he has access to Howard, you know, 24/7. Well, it's like when Christophe says he calls at 2:30. Once you become into Hans' circle, it's one of those situations where, hey, he's got your phone number and he will call, you know. So
There are worse things.
there are worse things, yeah. There's worse things.
One of those people that sleeps 3 hours a night.
Well, and even then he's dreaming in scores and synths, and but I think what Lippold had made a observation, and like a master architect, he will have these junior composers, a stable of people that have their own assistants and their own interns. Like it's just this whole tree of things, and he's at the top, and he will add 5% at the end, and that takes it from great to magical. You know, like it really, his years of experience and touch with that sort of thing.
And the amazing thing is everybody in the organization knows that. They just spend hundreds of hours on something. Hans looked at it for a minute, made some minor changes, and that made it really great. And, just very good.
Yeah.
That's something which is impressive. When the way we were working is, so it was just before Ed arrived, but we first saw the movie, but in the state where it was, so there was no CGI, no sound effect, no real music. And then we met Denis Villeneuve, who told us basically what were the intention on what he was expected for each scene, and from that we were really free. The first thing I did, I asked Hans, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Do whatever you want." So it was really blank pages. It was kind of scary also because you have no idea what you should do.
You're out on a tightrope.
And then everybody comes with some ideas, and we present these ideas to Denis the next time. And as you said, every time we were showing something, Hans had some ideas, some small additions to what was proposed, but that was really very often game changing. And it happens one, we say, okay, that's great, twice, third, and over and over, and say, okay, this guy is just amazing. Sometimes it's a very small thing. It can be small tick, tick, tick to be added somewhere, but that really makes the difference. And so that's really all over.
Did he ever reject what you were doing outright? Say, no, I don't like that, I don't want that?
Hans, not.
Not at all.
It's Denis.
Right.
Denis will not say, I don't like it. Denis will say, this is not what I want to express. So usually,
good way of putting it.
there is never any criticism on what people are doing. There is never any competition between people, which is kind of incredible because they are all huge composers or players. But we are just making proposition, and Denis says, okay, that's the direction where I want to go to, or no, that's not the direction. And so he has a kind of a key word. When he says, I deeply love it, that means okay, that's Frozen. That's why. And until he says this, we know we have to improve and come with additional new ideas and so on.
And Hans wouldn't be shy to have sounds dialed up and start playing things and improvise the picture with Denis. And it's very loose. Like I was really surprised. So you have these spotting sessions. Well, not spotting sessions, but it's like review sessions. So usually about twice a week or once a week, there would be a thing. Well, Denis is going to come in, and then all the composers come in, and Hans is there, and then he has and they would go through the cues, and at a certain point they would try things out, and Hans wasn't shy to say he would have these cues come up for a particular section. And it was interesting, too, for me, because I wasn't there when he got to see the film. So to me, the films, all I saw was little bits. I wasn't really get the big picture. But he didn't, they would go through, and he would say, well, who did this cue? And so, it'd be one of the composers would go through. And everything was delicated out. And the way we typically worked was to have one of the other composers come up to us and say, well, can you add this, and here's the scene. Often we didn't work to picture. We didn't have the picture there. We worked to a predefined cue. And Hans works completely in 4-channel setup. So whenever we got these cues, they were always a 2-channel version and a 4-channel version. They're always printing all these versions.
How much information do you get about what the cue that you're doing is for, like in terms of
we know that.
Story
Yeah.
But there's no picture. They just tell you where it is in the story and how much time they need to film?
Twice a week, we had a review session with Denis. So we were studying the movie scene by scene. And for each scene, Denis was saying, okay, this is what I want to express. Sometimes
you're very intimate, like when you're doing this, you're very intimately familiar with the entire
We had the movie
storyline.
with the current editing, so the editing was still changing at that time. But so we had the movie, Denis Villeneuve was with us, and was really saying what he was expecting. So sometimes it was, okay, Paul is now quite scared, but he knows things are going well with Shani, so he's also happy, but he has this strange vision for tomorrow. So sometimes it's very kind of complicated, but that's what you have. And then you go back to your studio and try to make something that could express for you what Denis asked, and you propose it.
So were you doing cues that were going like from zero, like building it from the ground up, or were you?
Less of that. I would think that we would have composers. Well, we would work on. They would just say, give us some ideas that are something that kind of flows or is atmospheric and general moods. But oftentimes the composers would come to us and they would say, well, we want to amplify this percussion here. So it was already structured out, and we would lay stuff in there.
I can give you 2 examples. The first one here, so that was just before you came. So we did a lot of jam together with Guillaume. So this is one of the jams. There's in the movie, there's you hear the metallic resonators. So this was just a jam between Guillaume and myself. We sent it to them, and this became, in the movie, the part when there's a little worm you know, and there's women who catch the worm, and
That's the saddest part of the movie.
So are there times where you
So-
are just creating something?
So
That you don't know what it's gonna be?
this was totally out of nowhere.
Okay.
Nowhere. I have another part here.
So it was just a jam that happened to fit in with?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh. I've never had a jam sound like that.
Well, there was some context.
What else you got?
So-
That was the recording of the resonators.
Yeah. Well, mixture. Yeah.
So this is an analysis of the voice. So this one was built on the top of a queue from other composers, and this one became the first scene when you see Fed Rotha, and he's testing his knife, which is a totally ugly scene. But this is exactly what was used, and if you go to the movie, you will exactly hear this one. So this is what it was describing, something we received the cue. They say, okay, I like the voice you were playing, and so we played it over and add the resonators, and that's now what is in the
You know,
movie.
resonators, it sounds like having a giant bow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bow of
Yeah.
Gong or something.
It, yeah, when Christophe says, Hans says, well, do whatever you want. Yeah, Hans truly is looking for new blood. He's, his ear is always open up, and he's a very smart man. He just knows that the best thing that you can get out of people is when you give them a comfortable environment and give them carte blanche and just say, express yourself. And that was actually really, really, I mean, you can easily find minions that are just going to do what exactly you tell them, but he's looking for, it's very interesting.
So he wanted a creative team, as creative as possible, and just gave them free rein to.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So when you say you get something from the other composers, what is that exactly? Is that some notation or?
No, it would be a track. Yeah, nothing's notated. Everything's a track. And we would get something, and it would be a particular scene. The scene we know, the copters are landing, and they're coming out, and it's a big action. We got to hit this point, and then we would work with that, and then supply them that material. And everything's in a centralized database, so you just post all the stuff up. They have their own method of keeping track of scenes, and they use the terminology of reels still, even though there aren't reels. So everything would have a reel and time code, and then they would be careful to print everything. I mean, what really amazed me is these composers would come up with something, and I would listen to it and going, this is your temp track? And it would be like, they're so good at their tools. And it was, I'm sorry?
You guys were working with Mach.
Well, they were like that first level of we've worked this cue up, and we say we're really not sure about that whole atmospheric thing, and then everything eventually would get going to Alan Meyerson, the amazing music mixer, who again another really nice guy, this guy, and the one thing that when I watched Dune, the first one, I really loved the mix. I loved the power and the depth of it. And so I was really encouraging to know, I'm going to be part of this thing. It's going to be in the golden hands of a not only the music mixer, but the final mixer of it, who has a lot of respect for the music and a lot of respect for the difference between the sound design and where the music comes in. So it was in good hands. Like it was.
Were there
real strings and things added as well in there?
He has a live band, and maybe you can describe the live set. There are live musicians that came in and played certain things, really competent, that have worked a long time with Hans. Play with Hans Zimmer live.
It's really at the last week when everything is more or less set up. All the live performers are coming. So there is Pedro Eustache, who is a famous wind player instrument, Tinaguo, Mariko, so for the cello, Gus Rigovan on the guitar. So just a set of Juan Herreros on bass and double bass. If you just look at Juan Herreros and Gus Rigovan, they were named being the best bassist in the world and the best guitarist in the world. So you play with that kind of guy, which is well.
Was there any live orchestra?
There was no live. So, no, there was no live in orchestra, and that was one of the rules for Dune. There was the only newly created instrument. So we had to create our own sounds, but that was true also. Pedro created a specific duduk. Tina and Juan played with well-tuned instrument with bow, which were not usually used for this kind of instruments. So there was no one single traditional instrument and no orchestral bank. Whenever there was one, it had to be replaced by a crafted sound on the synthesizer. So.
It is a science fiction movie, so that's where you want to go. Yeah. And Pedro is an amazing wind player, and now he's a guy that has so much energy, so positive. But now we got him an Eagan Matrix module, and that's his. He's really into the electronic stuff, and that's his primary sound module for the electronic stuff. But a master duduk player, and just amazing. When he came in to track his stuff, it was really quite cool. He just had all this range of things.
That's
there you go.
Playing with you. That's on the Eagan Matrix module.
That's just like 70s Lyricon.
So it wasn't a real doo-doo?
No,
It was, but not in this one.
These one are also what we call market sound. I will explain them after just listening.
Those were sounds that the creator created?
Yeah. It's in these two situations they were asking for some specific kind of sound. So these are what we call zagarit, the women singing that way. But there is nobody singing here. That's the three of us playing on the continuums, and this is in the movie. And the previous one is we called it the market ambience. And same thing, everything is played, so that's a set of horn and wired instrument from North Africa. And we played everything on the continuum, and then we gave this to the composers, and this appears to be in some place in the movie. So that was a request for an ambience or a kind of sound that they were.
We gave the composers a 2-track plus stems, so because we knew that they had to mix it into their whole collage of things.
And they integrated that into the whole soundtrack?
Yep.
Are there sections where you're soloed?
Well, you can really hear Christophe's in the two, the sad scene that. Oh, okay. Well, yes. I'll just yes then.
Well, you mentioned the composers using other tools. What did you mean?
Well, we went into some of the composers have all their own rooms in there. It's like this factory, and so each one has their own specific tools that they use. But what they all have access to is a lot of them use Zebra, and a lot of them use a custom-built sampler. And you can imagine if with Hans and his budget and the length of time that he's been doing scores and the numbers. I mean, what's amazing about that place is you walk around, you see all the posters, you see all the movies he's been involved in, and it's just mind-blowing, like just everything. And but all the composers have access to this custom bespoke sampler that is inherently 4-track. So all his samples are done with 4-track. So when he has a choir, he has a Russian choir that he recorded in his studio in London, and so those are his own custom sound libraries.
The posters are behind. This is the corridor to the studio where we're heading to Studio B here. And on the path to Studio B, there were all this. He did over 140 movies. That's kind of crazy.
Even that movie, yeah.
And so that's everywhere. And also, if you go, one funny thing, if you go to the toilets, look at how they are.
Is that real bad?
Yeah, it's real bad. And all the awards he's having, he has, are all in the toilet.
A phone.
You have a phone and a TV in the toilet.
Not like we're not all using our cell phones in that thing.
Was one of those 3 a.m. calls from the toilet?
He didn't say. And that's the same one. That the one with the score.
Yeah, this one was interesting. On the wall, he's got a score from the Oscars, and it's the trumpet part of all the different cues. Yeah, there it was. So the trumpet player is ready with this. So they have when they introduce the movies, those are all the different bits. And when they have the winner, they have another score part that they're going to play.
Well, he's famous for not reading music himself. He must have hired a transcriber to do all of that.
Well, he wouldn't have been in, someone would have transcribed it, and he wouldn't have been involved in that.
Now, did he give you any kind of visual reference for what he wanted, other than the timing and what the scene was about?
Not really, no.
Oh.
Yeah.
What was your things that you tended to go to when you were designing things or coming up with stuff? What did you naturally go to when you were faced with these? When they came in and gave you a request for something,
Yeah.
and as you turned to your tools, what was the things that you sort of said, oh yes, I'll just use?
Did you immediately know what he wanted?
What tool
and how you
I'm used to kind of associate images with sounds, so that's the way my mind is working. So, seeing the movie and having intentions from Denis, I had sounds in my mind, so I just did them. I guess it's different from person to person, but I found it quite easy. The most difficult was the first time. We did the first jam with Guillaume, and when you have to press send, and you know that the whole team is going to receive it, say, can I really press? But we did it, and they were happy with the first proposition we did. So we just.
The other question is, were there sets of sounds that you brought with you, or particular templates that you worked off of? Fairly frequently?
Yeah, one thing I didn't say, when I had this very first call with Hans, he said there will be a lot of emphasis on women in the movie, with Shani, with the Bene Gesserit, and so on. So I knew that I need to express things about women, and that's where I used a lot the analysis tool. The
analysis tool.
The
voice sounds.
Voice.
Yeah.
And another thing is said that for Harkonnen they wanted metallic ambience. So we brought the metallic resonators. That was kind of obvious, and that was pretty old. So nothing else was prepared. Then that was just reacting to their requests.
Actually, with the Baron too, that's one where Denis shifted it, because they had a particular flavor. There's a scene where the Baron arrives at the arena, and we worked actually with that composer, Andrew, quite a bit. Some of the composers, they used us more or less. So, but Andrew used us quite a bit, and Andrew did a lot of interesting work on that one, and it completely shifted. I was watching it the first time. I knew, oh boy, this is going to be hard for that whole thing to speak, because the Baron is interesting. There's a crowd of 100,000 people. The sound, it's just going to be overwhelming. And what they're doing here is, I felt at that time it was going to be hard, and Andrew had to change it around. He spent a lot of time. There are dream sequences about water in there that he spent a tremendous amount of time doing that subtractive type of composition where you throw up, 30 things or whatever, how many things that you have, and you start to pull out and you try to find from those what's the quintessential element of that. So when you watch the movie and you listen to those dream sequences that Paul's going through, they're really right to the point. And in the final movie, I said, listen, wow, he really did an amazing job. And it's funny because at that point it sounds simple, but to me that's the hardest thing to do is to remove the things that you've fallen in love, but you just got to get rid of them. And he did that.
Sounds a little like sculpture.
I was going to
Sculpture,
say,
yeah,
remove
yeah.
everything that's not part of the statue.
Yeah. Reveal what's underneath.
But Hans introduced one person that he's worked with for a long time is this guy named Chaz Smith. And Chaz is a really interesting guy. And so we didn't meet him. And what Chaz does is he has a house where he builds sculptures and he builds resonators, things that you bow and strike, and they're so big they can't leave his house. So Hans had gone and recorded a bunch of these things and built like sampler-based things. So they called it like the monster organ, and it was all based on these metallic resonators and going through there. And so at one point, he had reached out to, he wanted to reach out to Chaz because he thought it might be useful for us to go down and to try to record things. But then it turned out that he talked to Chaz's wife, and he was in hospice. He was at the end of his life. So if you watch Dune and look for the credits, besides seeing our name, where we're instrument designers, you'll see a nice little tribute to Chaz.
Right.
And the thing about Hans too is like you don't have to worry about how you're going to be credited. He has a lot of respect for the team. So, his name is going to be in the front. It's going to say, music by Hans Zimmer, but he'll list every single person involved in it.
How many other people were considered composers?
What would you say, 4 or 5? There was Steve.
There was the main
Andrew.
two other, Dave and Steve were the two main others. So it's mainly Hans and 2 others. And then we were about 12 around with different roles being from sound design to putting some stuff like that.
Were you surprised when you were listed as instrument designer rather than, sound designer? Or?
Yeah, I had no idea how would be credited. So it was a surprise.
It was never discussed.
So did you find out the first time when you saw the film? In the theater?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm happy they spelled my name right.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah, you do, Gary.
Yes, I do. I even appreciate it when they pronounce my name right.
Yeah.
But, do we have any other video to watch?
Not video. If you want to listen to some of the sounds.
Absolutely.
This
Are
one.
you going to play it live?
Yes. Just a subset. We did. We sent 260 files of audio files to them. So that's good. So that's just a few extract of.
How did you transfer the files?
They have a big.
They have a
servers, so
big server.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's the data management there is somebody's.
Some people are dedicated to it,
Yeah.
and then
they have a language too. They've done so many movies that they just know how things and structure. It's just expected. Yeah. It's really.
This sound is for the worms, and at the end of the day, it has been used when you see at the end of the movie the Harkonnens raising out of the sand because of an explosion. And that's one of them. So that's really sound design.
That's actually a good example of. There's no real difference between the sound design and the music. It flows back and forth. Yeah.
This is the. So that's the example of what you were listening just before.
We do 20 layers of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or more traditional ones. One thing which is heavily used in the movie also is a shepherd tone. So that always raising, these always raising tones. And we
tons of shepherd tones.
Yeah.
Shepherd tones.
And using the Genie oscillators, we did another kind of shepherd tones where the
harmonic shifting.
It's only the harmonics are shifting.
Yeah.
So you have a note. And we have the same thing with up, of course.
Did you guys have to think about taking the recirculator off, knowing that they're going to have to mix this in a giant environment?
To take the recycler?
No, in terms of the space of it, no, that was, they wanted stuff pretty well.
They liked it wet.
They wanted you to mix into it as if it was going to be the final thing.
Yeah. I asked them, they say, if do it the way you like the sound. If you like with the reverb or the delay or whatever, keep it and we will manage after. So.
And oftentimes our stuff was getting filtered through, either sometimes a sub-composer of a composer too. So there was a lot of layers of things going. You just imagine how many tracks were
Well,
finally
they're probably
sculpted.
mixing it themselves and then printing it to audio and saying to the next guy. And it's
Yeah.
process again.
And they've done it so much, those submixes sounded fantastic. Like I told you, when we first got these cues, we'd see them and say, man, this sounds finished. But then in the movie, you say, okay, it's been, it's had magic fairy dust sprinkled all over this thing, so.
You spent like $10 billion to make the stuff they throw away.
Yeah,
I mean, like his sample that you described, $10 million is probably the low number.
Yeah.
And they
That's
reused,
trash.
they reused a cue when the Emperor arrives. What was the, there was originally something, and that was Steve or was it Dave was working on that?
It was Dave.
Dave working on that cue, and they had something that they had thrown away. I can't remember the movie, but anyway, Dave reworked that. So yeah, it just goes into the library of things. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So do the two?
Question?
I just wanted to throw it. I saw Dune 2 in 4DX theater. Oh my god. The stuff you guys made, cut through your entire body. It was amazing.
Well, that's good sound mixing. Really. For me, I really like Dune 2 better than the original Dune. I think most people do. Yeah, and I don't think it's just because we worked on it.
That's what made all the difference. Yeah, it's gotten better reviews.
So there was that love theme that ends up at the end of the movie, and that is actually a slowed down version from Dune when they arrive on Arrakis the first time and they play the bagpipe theme, and it's a half-speed bagpipe thing. That's a trick that Hans has done before. And so we're in this session, and Hans had done a beautiful, slow, emotive version of it. He'd worked on it. And we were in the scoring, and we were in the session there, so I'm sitting there with all the composers there, and he's got like this couch, and I just, people sit over there, so I'm sitting here, and I've got Tanya, the producer, next to me, and Denis right here, and Hans up there, and they played this whole thing, and it's really so beautiful, and going through it. It was, Hans had just laid it into sort of as an emotional thing. There's no way in the final movie that it's going to be that long, but he just wanted to sort of show it as an emotional sort of aspect for Denis, and it was the first time that it really worked out that love theme in sort of the beautiful chords that Hans put in there, and it's like, so it ends up and it just stops. Hans is there, and then he turns around to me and says, Ed, what do you think? So, what do you say? It's like, I just said goosebumps, and it really was goosebumps. It was so, and you match something that's like all that beautiful, that love relationship that is in the movie, and
But as a movie writing, just for a movie, I think it's a great triumph. I mean, Dune was one of my, when I was young, there weren't very many good science fiction books to begin with, but Dune was, and still is, one of the very best. But Dune has, if you read it, has very little character development, has very little emotion in. It's written as, well, I think the author knew what he was good at, so it's written as a history book rather than as a, anyway, in the movie, they deviated from the story quite a bit to make a good movie, and it's fantastic. And this was one of the things they did that really isn't present at all in this form in the book, and I thought it was just fantastic. I was actually quite afraid of the Dune movie. I liked other older Dune movies, but they were pretty to look at. This one was just really amazing. So I think as a core for what future will remember this movie as, that scene is, they just did a great job.
Do you think it's likely that Hans will invite you to take part in part 3?
I'm guessing more likely yes than no.
I would think so. I mean, this contribution, I mean, he couldn't get this from anybody else.
And like he had a long-term relationship and still has a relationship with Howard. You know, once he finds certain things that he is working with, and that Zebra for him is the synth that does it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's a big CS80 fan, so you know, and the Zebra can do that. That kind of texture.
Yeah, Zebra really struck me, and I recognized exactly what it was on the Blade Runner movie.
Yeah.
He had a CSA flavor too. They broke
Yeah, he has to.
But it's different. Hans was kind of just a supervisor in that film. I forget the other guy who proposed it.
Yeah, there was some strife there.
He came in, Hans would just come in and be like, too big. That was like most of his contributions, like, no, you whatever. And he let them use apparently he had 2 CS80s just in storage. It's like,
Yeah. Well, yeah, his studio is
Just
you
incredible.
just like quickly Christophe showed like the rack with the Royer things, you know, the preamps and all the neat stuff. It's just a you know, it's money spent like just for the most beautiful things that the best mics, like Alan has his own kits of all these. Like I talked to Alan and I said you know, it's like, well, you've got all these mics here. What do you think they're worth? And he says, it's around $200,000 worth of mics. So I will share one funny story with Alan. So we were coming back from lunch, and so there was a building in behind, and we were coming back from this little lunch area, and all of a sudden we saw Alan coming, and he saw us out from the back and said, hey, guys, come in here. So we went into his studio, and he's like, we're going through, and he's got a Pro Tools session up, and he's starting to do some temp mixes of the music, and going through and starting to work on it. He's going through, he says, I got this track, and I've got this particular thing, and he's playing it, and he's going through, and it's got like, it's really weird. And so he's in a Pro Tools session, and it's going through, and at a particular point, it's dropping out and going through, and so and I know Pro Tools, and so we were trying to figure out what it was. Why is this particular track? And we were looking at the audio and said, well, okay, try moving it. And then if you know Pro Tools, there's a thing that you can do, it's called consolidation. So if you have like some edits together, I said, well, have you tried consolidating the audio? And he said, yeah, I tried that. Well, let's try it again. And we tried that. And we're looking at it, well, it's got to be something in the plugin. So we looked at the plugins, and we said, no, it's working. This plugin's working, that one's weird. And then finally realized, I don't know who realized it, but
you did.
Yeah, so we said, well, let's mute the plugin, and then it worked. And it was the copy protection in the Waves plugin, which was time code stamped. And so it was, and they use a time. So some people use a noise, or they time them out. But the Waves one used a thing where it knows the time code, and it just says, okay, you're done here. And it would do that. And it was really funny. It's like, here you've got all this money and things, and they're running something in demo mode. Only because he's on another computer, and he just doesn't have his key, or he didn't bother to, you know. The demo works for 30 days, so he got working for 30 days. And then so it was kind of a funny thing.
That happens all
Alan, another nice guy, really smart, like his genuine person.
You had a question?
So just on the firmware side, were you working with like cutting edge, or were you working with something that was
1009.
1009 to get the analysis, because that's the only thing it was running in. And then in my setup, I was using more of the current stuff.
Okay.
But it was all like Osmos and Continuum, all Eagan matrix, just all Eagan
I
matrix.
was just wondering if like it evolved during the sessions, like if you added pieces.
It was too risky. Yeah, there was no reason to do. We had enough to do just writing-wise.
So did Pedro play in the Eagan Matrix make it in the movie?
I
Don't know.
I don't think not in the movie.
Because you're saying he's
No, he's touring with the Eagan Matrix, but not in the movie. He was really discovering it, but yeah.
That's
Probably
another
next
thing,
time.
those musicians, Christophe mentioned this yesterday, they're all technically oriented too. And they seem just like, you're just earthy musicians, like, hey, but man, they're smart guys and gals. It's like, it was impressive. So Pedro got right into the Matrix, the engine, loved it, but it was too new for him. He just got it and he was,
Well, it's time for us to wrap
Yeah.
this up, but before we do you feel like you're embarking on a new career? Will this lead to other work with other directors and other composers, do you think?
I'll put it this way. Like at this point in my life, I really enjoy working with Lippold so much because, we really are equals, and everyone in our team is treated as equals. And you can be under the most benevolent king and work for them, but they're still a king, and I don't know. It's nice to go into it, but it's nice to be home.
Well, if Howard Shore gives you a call, you're going to tell him no? I didn't think so.
Yeah, I already have some
Oh.
incoming projects,
All right.
but also for me, what you saw yesterday with the analysis tool is directly coming from the experience we had there. I mean, it's also a boost for what we are doing for years. So it's not a shift; it's just a continuation and maybe a boost for what we were just doing for years and years.
Hey guys, we're actually over time. Can we do maybe one more question? And I was, as much as I'm enjoying this tremendously.
Do you have a question?
No, I'm being the bad guy again and saying, hi.
Boo! So any other questions before we go?
Who wrote the Vintage Gesture music?
Don't know.
What is
Who wrote the Just?
Like which scene are you?
I haven't seen that.
Oh.
It's all interwoven.
Usually the main theme are from Hans, and then the arrangement and the organization within the queue is from the composers.
I was wondering how they decided which composer gets which character, or if the characters are separated by leitmotif like in classical music.
Hans would say things like, oh, this is more in Dave's wheelhouse.
Okay.
So he's got people that he knows, and who's the fellow, the younger fellow that, I can't remember, Osmond? No, the more percussive guy, like...
Steven.
Steven, yeah, and Steven, so he was a keyboard player, but he kind of, in the team, he was always doing the keyboard percussion. So yeah, he would divide things up that sort of way, according to the sort of orchestral flavors of things.
So if you haven't seen the film, see the film. And whether you have or not, get the soundtrack and listen to it either on a great pair of speakers or headphones. It's very deep and it bears repeated listening.
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. Yeah.